At Intuit, we believe you cannot have prosperity without equality. Women and people of color should not be paid less than men for the same work. 3 years ago, we made a commitment to reach and maintain pay equity for our employees. But pay equity is an ongoing process, and all companies must join this fight. Like the 19th Amendment, we are not done.
Hello, everyone. It's been another amazing day. Thank you for sticking with us, for following along. And I'm glad you're here. You'll be glad you're here because we are sitting down with the great Emily Weiss, the founder and CEO of Glossier, the beauty business she started 6 years ago that has skyrocketed in growth and in our world valuation, more than $1 billion. Emily, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and first ever virtual business conference for me.
Well,
I don't know if it's for you.
Me as well. And actually, my first question is, I mean, you look lovely. Are you wearing makeup? And if so, when was the last time you wore makeup?
So I did just look in the mirror and ask myself, what does one do when you are doing a virtual conference? So I did put on some quick Glossier makeup, but I will admit it was the first time in several months.
There you go. Well, but we'll get into that because there's still plenty of growth and booming in the beauty business that comes out of a pandemic. So maybe start there. I'm sure it's not business as usual at Glossier, but what's different? What have you done differently? What's on your mind these months as you head into the fall?
I mean, so much. So first of all, I can't believe that it's September 3rd. So that's pretty wild in the year that is 2020 that continues to go on, forever. I mean, so everything has changed. One of the things that I, told the team early on when we all switched to work from home was there's not going to be a back to normal. There's probably only going to be a future to normal and a future normal state. And I think, as you probably can, agree as a fellow business owner, that's true. So we all worked from home. We're about 250 people in New York, and actually all London, Seattle, but mainly in New York. And everyone went to work from home. There's not a CEO that I've spoken to who has not said, this is just a year of, I don't even want to say the word, but unprecedented, business change, business disruption. For beauty, it's been really an interesting year. Obviously a huge pull forward to e-commerce from offline. So a lot of those industry shifts that people thought were going to take a few years were really pulled up. And that's been really exciting for Glossier because we launched as a direct-to-consumer beauty brand 5 or 6 years ago. And our main channel is e-commerce. So, we were as well prepared as any of us could be to move into this new future normal. And really, really proud of the team for adjusting so well to this new Zoom universe.
And you shut down your retail stores. Tell us more about that and how you adapted.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think back to that day and whenever it was, mid-March, and think about how crazy it sounded to say we were going to be closed for 2 weeks. Us and lots of other retailers could never have predicted that 2 weeks would turn into, in our case, really indefinitely. We're probably not going to reopen, definitely not till at least 2021. But really the thinking for us is probably not till the pandemic looks different and is behind us. You can't have beauty products open, no testers, so a lot of the reasons why you would go into a Glossier retail store, community, lots of people, it just doesn't really make sense right now. So we're really using this time to focus on our core business, on e-commerce, and continuing to make magical experiences through our product and different partnerships and try new things.
Yeah. Let's talk about those a little bit. I feel like from a marketing standpoint, you guys have always been on the creative edge. What are you doing differently now? What's working maybe that you'll keep doing?
I mean, one thing that's really been amazing, I'm always in awe of our creative team. I think of them sort of as like the, Pixar within Disney. And so they're really focused on making magic. They have done some really incredible, offline shoots. The way that we're creating campaigns and content has been incredible. We sent, for example, our pink hoodie that had a 10,000 person wait list when we brought it back. We sent it down to Iris Apfel, who is a 100-year-old influencer who was down at her fashion influencer who's down at her house in Palm Beach, and she self-styled herself, shot herself, and that was a really fun moment. The other thing that we really appreciated the opportunity to do was we had a product launch that we delayed right in March. And I think as most brands grappled with, consumer brands who had new product launches, we thought, should we launch? Should we not launch? Like, this doesn't really feel like an appropriate moment. It was a hand cream. And so we threw out, everything we worked on for hand cream in terms of our launch plans, and the team completely redid it. We donated thousands of hand creams to healthcare workers and other products. And we had this amazing, really heartwarming video of staying at home that our community really loved. So a couple examples of this sort of zig and zagging to sort of make the magic happen from remote this year.
So, I mean, I think in addition to just the unprecedented pandemic, this has also been a really, challenging and tough moment when it comes to so many social issues. And we've seen this real awakening around racism that's affected so many businesses, including Glossier. I mean, I think you spoke out recently about some feedback that you guys had received from retail employees accusing the company of racism and other things. And I'm just curious, sort of bring us inside what that process was like from you. Like, what did you learn? What is the company doing? What work do you think maybe you still have to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for sure, I think those are the two biggest crises that we faced, this year. And from a racial injustice perspective, post George Floyd and BLM, I mean, every company has had their own sort of internal reckoning, right? And audit and sort of desire to really do better and look at all of their own systems with fresh eyes. And so for us, that meant several of our retail employees from one of our locations reached out to me directly in emails in June to share their stories about negative experiences, particularly from customers in the store. And I'm really grateful they did. It was really incredible. They didn't have to. And as a growing company, it's really, really important, especially to me as the founder, that things like that never happen, and that we are constantly working to make our insides match our outsides from a standpoint of process and policies. So we did a really big investigation. I spoke to dozens of employees, myself, and we created a pretty good plan of action in terms of how we would address all of their concerns and put that into practice. Of course, it's difficult. I mean, we are closed. So we're not going to sort of see that come to fruition for a while, but really grateful that people use their voices, because as a growing company, I always say, if you see something, say something, and it's really important for us to understand where we can improve, and this is never ending work, equity within organizations, and it's never been more important than it is this year.
How do you balance obviously you want to create a culture, like the best culture you can. You guys are also, I noticed you've got, I guess, new grantees, and you're trying to support, Black owned businesses and many, many other things. It seems like businesses like Glossier have really a range of social programs and impact programs. And I'm sort of wondering, how is wearing your founder hat, you sort of balance that versus, you know, all the other things you're doing in running the business. I mean, obviously it's important, but it seems like we're demanding a lot of brands and companies right now in terms of these social issues. And while clearly I think they have a huge role to play, I'm curious how you kind of calibrate that as a founder.
Yeah, it's you know, I think you're right. And you know, I've had so many conversations with other leaders this year who are navigating change and trying to make, you know, trying to do good, trying to do more, do less harm and do more good. Companies are, you know, a repetition of sort of good and bad, just like people are. No one's perfect, and so it's sort of how do you do more good and less harm. And Glossier is no different there. It's also interesting because, you know, as a company, we were built on the internet. We were built by having conversations with our community. We were built by this you know, this entire notion of beauty being a conduit for connection, right? For people learning about beauty products and also getting closer with one another. And that's still very true today. And so as we face, you know, social issues, it's been interesting to and like you said, a challenge to say, where can we make the most impact, right? And as a growing company. And for us this year, you know, if you look at the beauty industry and you look at funding, and obviously this is your wheelhouse, I don't need to tell you, it's pretty white. The beauty industry is pretty white. Funding is pretty white. And as a new future beauty company, or the future beauty company, we hope at Glossier, we wanted to help as much as we can. So we did kick off I'm really proud of our team. I actually just got off a call with the 16 grant winners right before I got on with you. Well, before I put on the makeup and then before I got on with you, to congratulate them. We put $500,000 to work and picked out of 10,000 applicants, 16 winners who are founding beauty companies. And they're the future. I'm really excited to get to know them. And for us, that was a way for us to make, you know, make an impact within our own industry. And yeah, I couldn't be more excited for that.
Do you think, and this is switching gears slightly, that's my warning, but I'm curious if you think female founders are held to different standards than male founders running?
Do I think so?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And, you know, I've had so many conversations, you know, as a female founder about exactly this. And I actually had talked to someone yesterday, actually a former Glossier employee, and we were talking about this. And her perspective was really interesting. She said, look, if you look at, let's say like male founders or white male founders or whatever, you have 1,000 of them. You have so many slots. There are so many spots and so you have a variety of, you know, types and people and companies and all these things. And if you're, you know, a woman, but even more importantly, if you're, you know, if you're POC, if you're Black, if you're part of the LGBTQIA, you know, populations, there's just not that much representation. And so, you know, people, I think, look to very, you know, few examples and try to sort of try to see themselves in very few examples, try to see themselves represented, right? And that's a lot of pressure for one person to sort of be all things to all people and sort of represent all people. So hopefully with, you know, with initiatives like, you know, the one we just had where if we need more representation, right? We need more representation from these groups. I hope that Glossier can play a small part in that with our grant program that we just did. But the more representation there is, I think the sort of less sort of pressure there will be on 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 founders to be all things to all people.
So I think in the past year, there's been a lot of articles that have been critical of female founders or companies led by women. And while you weren't the subject of those pieces, I'm just curious, sort of as a female founder and an observer of the media, if you read those, had any reaction to them, have any broader thoughts around how the press in particular treats female founders?
I mean, To be totally candid, it's been a busy year. I wish that I had read more than I have, just generally this year. I mean, listen, I think whether you're a female founder, you're any kind of founder, we have a job to do, right? And obviously we wear a ton of hats and we have a lot of responsibility. It's really, it's tough to say criticism of certain people more than other people. I just mentioned this in the last question, but I think when you have so few examples to look at, they're going to have disproportionate attention, period, right? So I'm not surprised that those stories jump out, and I think representation just matters so much. So one of the most important things for Glossier, particularly as we look ahead to rebuild our retail channel, is placing just as much importance on the employee experience as we do on the customer experience. And I think for any company growing, that is really, really important. 2020 has taught us that you are nothing without, your people and your team and your company. And through these teams of these startups like Glossier that is disproportionately, female, we hope that we have the next generation of founders, right? We've had great people leave Glossier and graduate Glossier and go on to found really exciting companies. That's what I try to focus on. And really, I think that's how we can make most change.
Talking about the business for a second, how is it doing? Are you making money? Are you losing a lot of money? How's the financial picture?
Cash is king in a year like 2020. Yeah. I think most CEOs would say that, most founders would say that. We were really fortunate to raise a pretty big Series D in 2019, $100 million. Sequoia led it. And we've been, doing pretty well watching that cash. And really our ambition is to not have to go out and raise more money. Every D2C business is different. So I don't want to compare us to different categories, different, sectors of D2C businesses, but, beauty fundamentally, and is a pretty sustainable business and a sector that continues to, the public markets still are really bullish on, even though, so much retail is closed this year and things like that. So we're really excited to be building a very sustainable business.
Do you have any of the IPO FOMO that I think is creeping in? And not necessarily to you, but it's funny. It seems like the last few months have been this, oh, wait, the stock market's doing so well. Now's the time to go. I do not need an IPO in 2020. I'm fine. What about 2021? How about 2021?
I mean, yeah, maybe we're certainly, prepared, and getting more and more prepared. I'm really lucky to work with a brilliant, CFO, Vanessa Whitman, who, has tons of IPO experience and Glossier is really, really lucky to be working with her.
One of the things, we've seen so many really interesting and massively successful D2C brands. We've also just seen tremendous competition in D2C. I wonder, I feel like Glossier, trounced a ton of competitors in beauty to get where you are. How do you think about just the low barrier to entry of D2C in general and how you maintain an edge?
Yeah. Well, I've always said this because investors have always asked it since the very early days of funding, which is, well, what's your competition and how are you going to, have an edge? And my answer is usually pretty similar, which is, this isn't Lyft versus Uber. This isn't, either or. This isn't, the only mattress purchase you're going to make for the next 10 years, right? So we as women, we buy a lot of products. I personally have, a dozen brands sitting in my cabinet. And so we try to just stay really focused on continuing to make magic and continuing to make really incredible products and experiences. And we had a head start. We got started back in 2014. We've always been digital. We're in a handful of countries and doing really well right now, with lots of international expansion ahead of us, lots of offline opportunity ahead of us whenever the time is right for that, and we're ready on our end. And so that's really just what we continue to focus on. There's also, really exciting things that we dream of, in after the day is done, I guess, of continuing to really help bring beauty discovery to our community in new and exciting ways. How do you get people talking? We've really long believed in the power of people sharing, their routines with each other, people sharing their favorite things with each other, their favorite products, and particularly with so much of commerce globally, not just, in the beauty sector moving online, and so much discovery online. There's really an opportunity there for beauty companies to help solve that discovery problem. So that's also something we get really excited about.
I think some people may forget that you started in the content business. You started with a blog into the gloss. And I wonder, what role do you see content continuing to play in Glossier and in retail?
Well, it's interesting. So we did start, I started a blog in my bedroom in 2010. So this is pre-Instagram, YouTube beauty influencer. That was really all about that idea of personal routines and discovering beauty through each other, as opposed to discovering beauty through advertising or a brand or something like that. And so that user-generated content has always been really interesting to us. Content this year is, on one hand, there's so little production, right? So if you look at if you're thinking about all the way through to Hollywood and, the film industry or whatever, production has really halted. But if you think about what you offer, consumers this year, it's really only content, right? Like everything you can't have physical experiences, very well this year. You can't travel, that much this year. So you have, all you have is sort of your channels and your direct channels, your Instagrams, your email list, your direct channels, and what do you put there? And so in some ways it's interesting because I think even though sort of traditional content production has slowed this year, what are we all looking at all day long on our phones, if not some kind of content this year? That's really, whether it's even, school is content if you're, you're online. So I've always been a big believer in content. It's going to be really interesting to see how social media evolves, I think, in the next couple of years. So that's something I'm pretty fascinated by, and what new platforms are going to emerge.
It was going to be my next question. As someone who has her finger on the pulse, and beauty is obviously a category very connected to social and to influencers, what's catching your eye as sort of interesting or new in the social arena?
It's so interesting because, we've always said at Glossier, everyone is an influencer. The minute you start to say, you start to judge, individuals as having more influence than others, I think that's just wrong. I mean, every single person in the age of social media can have, influence on your 20, 200, 2,000, 2 million, followers. That's why they follow you for a reason, right? And so, I just think user tools are so fascinating. Like there's all the new sort of interfaces and tools and kind of this move to video. I also think there's something so refreshing about Gen Z and sort of this pivot. So it's not just the tools, it's also the creators and how they want to appear. And so you're moving from this Instagram sort of labored over, sort of perfected sort of, ideal to this quick content, humorous, joyful. I'm probably not using words that Gen Z, uses, but I'm an old millennial, so and so I like that. And for us, at our company, we've always believed in this idea of, skin first, makeup second. This idea of, you're being on a journey, right? Beauty is this journey. It's not a destination. And so emergent social platforms, whether it's TikTok or anything else, are really fun because they haven't reached that peak maturity where you start to kind of not have fun with it anymore. And so it's going to be a weird and wild ride to see what happens to TikTok. From
How's your TikTok game? Do you feel like you're,
I personally have not. I am the 90% on social platforms that does not make content on. I'm a voyeur on TikTok. But Glossier is huge on TikTok. I mean, it's so interesting because we really do have sort of a foot in both worlds with like, I'm 35, right? I like our products. And then you have, Gen Z and the younger generation and women who started buying our products 5 or 6 years ago. And they have, now they have 9-10-year-old daughters, right? And they love Glossier. They're wearing the sweatshirt. It's too big on that. I mean, it's amazing, right? So it's really fun to be a part of a brand and of a global brand that is so intergenerational, right? And that can apply to so many different people who bring it to life in new ways.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, but I actually want to ask you about the sweatshirt because you brought it up a few times. And I also feel like for many of us who run businesses, it's like, these sort of iconic, like buzz marketing, like how do you guys come up with it? What's your advice to people with maybe more boring brands and news perhaps, or others around just, what goes into capturing things like that really do evangelize the brand in so many ways?
I mean, it's a really good question. And unfortunately, I don't know if I have a great answer for you. I wish I had some like sexy, buzzy, answer. We have always, we started out by listening. So we do get great ideas. We get ideas off of, Glossier subreddits. And we have people saying, thank you so much for listening to us. Like we asked you for, this and you've made X. We also have an amazing team, right? We have a creative team and product team and people all over the world who really have their finger on culture and on what would be fun, what would be clever. And I think one of the other things we've focused on from a very early point in time, I've always looked at brands like Nike, looked at brands like Apple, brands that really evangelize design, quality, culture. And for us, one of the things we focused on really early was not putting any limits on what Glossier could apply to, right? So that sweatshirt, I said from, a week before we launched, or for many months before we launched, we should have a sweatshirt. We should make a beauty company whose sweatshirt you want to wear, right? Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, the sweatshirt is almost an output of all of the inputs, right, that make you want to, be a part of Glossier or represent Glossier as sort of a lifestyle. And that's been really fun. So who would have known that like we'd have to pump the brakes on apparel because it's, it's like such an exciting category for us. But that's really fun because it can apply to experiences. The brand stretches to so many different types of experiences, which is always, it's really exciting. It's really fun.
Do you think, 5 years from now, will we think of Glossier as a beauty brand?
I would love to, because I would love for us to redefine what a beauty company means. So what does the word beauty itself actually mean? Does it mean cosmetics and makeup? Like, I don't think so. I think beauty is, it's about seeing beauty in the world or having a beautiful experience or having a beautiful reflection or interaction or a beautiful object or a beautiful failure, right? So the idea of beauty being so pigeonholed to mean, women's, makeup and skincare and frivolous stuff, I think is, it's just limiting. I don't think that's what beauty means. I don't think it's what beauty should mean. But I like the idea of bucking that by continuing to sort of show what we think it could be.
Awesome. Well, Emily, with that, we're going to turn it over to some of our attendees to ask their questions.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Emily, thank you so much for being here and for being here again. We have some great questions teeing up in the chat. So keep firing away, everyone. We have questions about the pink bubble wrap. So, you know, we'll get to the important stuff. But let's start with one. When you were starting the founding team, hiring early at Glossier, how did you figure out what that should be? And how did you find people you know, who would share your vision, but be the people you need to get the company to the next level?
Great question. And it definitely changes over time at different scale of company. You know, we've been really fortunate in the last year or two to bring on some amazing, you know, scaled leaders. In the really early days, and listen, I'm hesitant to give advice because as a rule, I think like, you know, I can only speak from my experience. I approached particularly the first couple of hires at Glossier when it was just a few people. I take a Venn diagram approach. And what you really want, or what I found is really, really helpful, is you want enough overlap on the important things in the middle, right? Vision, mission, values between you and the people around you. And then you want you to sort of be over here in this circle and them to be over here in this circle in terms of skill set, in terms of passion, which areas you dig in on. And you just want enough overlap. And if there's, you know, you can imagine if there's too much overlap, then you probably aren't going to get everything done that you need to get done in terms of skill set. But if there's not that central overlap in the middle around where you're going, what you're building, and ease of communication, things like that, then that's also off balance. So that approach has served me and us really well in the beginning, and even still today, it's scaled pretty well to think about that Venn diagram.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from Laura. Emily, can you talk about the inclusiveness of men in your advertising and the impact it's had so far?
That is so interesting because men ask me, I have been asked by men, you know, do you have a men's line? And we always say, yes, it's all of our products. Like, you know, and traditionally in beauty marketing, at least, not to, you know, spill all the secrets, but a lot of the time the products are largely the same. Like if it's a moisturizer, an eye cream, but maybe it's called Fuel Eye Cream, right? Like strong, like 2-in-1, like the sort of marketing around this kind of like heteronormative, like masculine, like, you know, thing really helps men, you know, that guy buy the product. But for Glossier, you know, we have plenty. My fiance loves, you know, our products. He uses our products. And of course, there's lots of different types of men in the world, and there's lots of different types of people in the world, which is amazing. So we really try to represent the world, you know, the world that we want to see and the world that we live in. And that's led to, you know, collaborations and including some really amazing, you know, amazing people, and, you know, including guys. So we try to take a sort of like non-binary approach to our marketing, and try to, you know, we're trying to change how the world sees beauty. That's what we want. And so we're constantly thinking about how can we do that every time we're creating content, every time we're launching a new product. How are we sort of seeing the world through Glossier colored glasses and constantly trying to offer people maybe something they haven't seen before.
From Kate, how have you navigated being a woman and young, typically a double whammy? I'm going to refer to the double whammy. I like that. Especially when you started, how did you ensure you were taken seriously by investors and by partners?
Yeah, it's so interesting. At dinner last night, so I'm in a quarantine house with my brother, his wife, my fiance, and my friend Morgan, who actually used to be my colleague at Glossier. We were having a conversation, an after dinner conversation last night, and she said, I don't like to tell people my age because she's thank you for saying, you know, I'm young. She's much younger. And it's for that very reason. She's like, so often people think they know better than me when I'm in a room with investors, or, you know, they think that I must not be able to trust my own instinct, or, and so on. And, I'm not going to, it's interesting for me, I guess, very personally. I just didn't let that get in my way. I think there's a propensity towards needing to be, actually, let me tell you some advice Katrina Lake does really well. She's at Stitch Fix. She's on our board. And when she was out fundraising, she said to me, and she was telling me about fundraising at Stitch Fix, and she said, listen, if you know your shit, if you know your numbers, if you know your business, and you are sitting there, talking about like real, total addressable market, real metrics, real numbers, like that's the best way to get people on board. Like, how do you ground in logic? And I thought that was very, very inspiring. And that's something that I try to do a lot is really ground conversations where I think I'm being undermined in what the data says, what the logic is. Like, let's stick to the facts, let's bring it back. And I would say that's kind of the best advice I would have. But it's not mine. I just gave you two other people's advice.
But great leaders in their own right too. A question about, what do you do when people doubt your vision? I don't know, earlier if people were, questioned, was it big enough? Was it bold enough? How do you kind of maintain that confidence?
Early in the day at Glossier, this was, so today is Into the Glosses 10-year anniversary, the blog that gave way to Glossier, and Glossier launched in 2014. And in the early days, pitching investors and saying, hey, I want to create a brand, and we want to create a beauty company that sold 100% on the internet. Obviously, the natural reaction is, how are you ever going to be successful if people can't touch and try your product? Because the channel is offline to touch and try beauty. So it was filled with doubt. I mean, everyone said no, basically, except, Kirsten Green in the early days from Forerunner, who invested in Glossier. I think it's really about how. We really walked people through how we would market, how we would think about, in the same way that, L'Oreal built their brand for the drugstore channel, in the same way that Estee Lauder built their corporation for the beauty counter channel. Someone needed to build a beauty company for and in conjunction with the internet. And as we know, that's where, COVID, if anything else, has accelerated this massively. I mean, beauty stands to be down 30% overall as an industry this year, but e-commerce is booming, right? And so for a business like ours, we were ahead of that curve by believing in that channel. So I think it's really about walking through the how you're going to do it, really grounded in reality, and just being really passionate, and also knowing what you don't know, I think, is highly underrated. So being able to say, I actually don't know that this will work, and that this will work, and then this will work. But I do know that these things will work, I think builds a lot of credibility, because, being realistic and being able to really understand is, especially in the early days when investors they're betting on you. They want to know, are you going to exercise good judgment? Are you going to zag when something doesn't work in the right direction? How many businesses pivot, right? So they're giving you money to essentially, yes, based on what you're initially believing in, initially pitching, but they're really giving you money. I mean, when it comes down to it, they're hoping that you're going to turn their money into more money somehow, right? And businesses, take a lot of different shape on. It's interesting for us because our mission, vision, and values have remained largely unchanged, even in 10 years, right? And so our long-term vision really has continued to kind of manifest in really interesting new ways that we could have, never imagined. Who would have thought that, in 2020, we'd be deploying $500,000 to fund Black-owned beauty businesses, right? And trying to change how the world sees beauty in that way. So, yeah, that's my advice or story.
You brought up Kirsten, who's getting shout outs in the comments, as she should, as well as, so a question about investors. How did taking on venture capital either change your expectations, change how you had to operate in those early days?
How did taking on venture capital change how I had to operate? Every entrepreneur who is, raising money from somewhere, every entrepreneur hopes that their investor or whoever, if they're so fortunate, when they're so fortunate to raise money, that whoever they raise money from has the same expectations. And so I was really lucky that, Kirsten and our other investors and those who are on our board have been really aligned the whole time with what Glossier could be, and what it could become, and really believed in the team since day one. And so, I've been fortunate to not have to sort of battle, I've never had an investor or board say, you must go do, X, Y, Z. And I think that values alignment, if you can find it, and really spending time, it's a marriage, right? So really, it really is a marriage. I mean, I've been married to Kirsten Green for, when did Kirsten invest in Glossier? It was 2013. That's longer than my current relationship. So, if you're so fortunate to be able to really dig in and be able to joint interview, making sure that both of you really have the same expectations, then that's a great start. That's the start you want.
Mm-hmm. For people who are, say more about how you, besides probably a lot of time together, how you kind of assess whether it's going to be a good fit.
I think really there's a few things. Short-term versus long-term thinking, that's a very basic question. Like, how long are you going to be happy still being in this thing? Some companies are built to, flip around really fast. And if you have two people come together and say, we both want to flip it around really fast, then that's a great, a great alignment. For us, it's always been about long-term thinking. That's always been our choice. Values. I think being able to say, here's how, I want to build this. Here's how I'll make trade-offs, particularly around things like, that we say a lot at Glossier, for example. It's like, there's always dollars and there's hearts. Like, are you trying to make dollars? Or are you trying to win hearts? And we always try to win hearts, right? That helps us constantly stay on task and in focus, because it means you're being really devoted to the customer, which is another core value of ours, right? We are built on listening. We are built in, amalgamating sort of information. We're built on gut instinct. We're built on our own, things that our team is really excited about. But how are you going to run the business? I think that's another thing. And what are your values when times get really tough? 2020 has been a very tough year for every business leader I know. And that's when values matter the most, right? Values sound really fun and kind of, this is value. And then the moment you need them the most is when there's these really tough trade-offs and these really tough decisions to make.
Mm-hmm. What's something that you've gotten better at as an entrepreneur?
Something I've gotten better at as an entrepreneur. Asking questions. Another leader told me, trying to remember who it was probably 6 months ago. They said, try something out once. I said, what? They said, try having a meeting where you only ask questions the entire time. Like, try sitting in a meeting with, about anything with, your team and only ask questions. I don't think I've been able to do that. Right. It's really hard, but that's what gets teams, I think, really engaged, really thinking, really forming their own opinions. And I think that's when real collaboration happens.
A great question from Laura. How do you balance those gut instincts and values with what you're hearing from customers? May not always be the same.
I don't know if I have an answer for that. Tough last question to answer. You know, Jeff Bezos has a saying about this, and I love this because it's like the opposite of what I would imagine from, you know, Jeff Bezos or Amazon, because I think of it as such a data-driven, you know, algorithm-driven company. And he wrote in one of his share letters something around, when I'm posed anecdotal information, and I'm posed data and they diverge, the anecdote says one thing, the data says another thing, I say rerun the data. I believe the anecdote. Maybe the data was run wrong. So, and I think that speaks a little bit to, again, that power of voice, and that power of when someone, you know, when someone's really sharing something in an anecdote, we're human beings at the end of the day. Every business is a compilation of a team of humans. We're not robots. So there has to be a level. You can't data your way to creativity.
Yeah. Well, that is a great, I mean, I don't want to give Jeff the last word, so we'll give you the last word on it. But great advice, Emily. Thank you for being here across the virtual stage today and for sharing all your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jessica.